Hi, Joshua. Hi, Joshua. Thanks for your program. I think it's really interesting. I like the idea of teaching box multiplication this way. Let me show you what I think is going on. It's rather subtle. So the first thing to notice is that, or to know, is that when the green flag is pressed, several things can happen in parallel, right? So these things are happening, but at the same time, all this stuff over here is happening. But it turns out that you can have even more things running in parallel, and I think that's what was happening with you. So let me show you. If you come down here, and suppose the person says, "You're right, press the left arrow to continue." And the person presses the left arrow. Well, pressing the left arrow starts this other thread down here, where people start doing this. But you have to remember up here that this code hasn't finished yet. It hasn't reached the bottom. So it's going to continue. It's going to pass by the else because the if part was satisfied. So after it says you're right, press the left arrow to continue, it then waits 6 seconds and then it starts waiting around for an answer. And that's where things can get a little dicey depending upon the timing of things. Because remember, the left arrow stuff is also running, and if it waits 6 seconds and just at the end of the 6 seconds this ask comes into play, this if answer might be triggered by your answer to this question, if you follow what I mean. Because both of these code segments are running at the same time. Now looking back here, what you really want is you don't want this code here to run every time. If the person has the answer correct, you don't want them to run this code segment. What you want is them to run the code segment only if the else comes into play, and you want to give them a second chance at getting the answer correct. So all you have to do really to fix this is just move all this code within the else. So now if the answer is 20, then it says you're right, press the left arrow to continue, and then it goes to the end and it's done. And now you're just waiting for the left arrow to be pressed. On the other hand, if they don't answer 20, if they answer something else, you give them the reminder, then you wait 6 seconds and you give them another chance. And whether they get it correct or not here, it'll end this thread, and then they'll wait for the left arrow to be pressed. Now similarly down here, for the left arrow, if it's correct and they press the up arrow to continue, you don't want the code to fall through here and then wait 6 seconds and do all this stuff. You only want to have them do this stuff in the case of the else. So you can move that up there. And you can move this stuff under the else here, and so forth. Okay? So that should fix the problem of, and I think there's more of them down here. You'll have to go through, like this one here. You'll have to go through and fix them. I think that will repair the bug you're seeing. Now the other thing I just wanted to mention, and this is completely optional, but right now you move from code fragment or code segment to code segment by having the user press the left arrow or the up arrow or down arrow or whatever, which is great, but it can run into a problem if the user presses the wrong key by mistake. So there's several ways around this. One way is, right now these things, which I call events, up arrow pressed or left arrow pressed, are triggering the behavior. If you want, you can create your own events. So let me show you. You can say, when I receive a message, so let's call this a message, I don't know, anything, Jim1. And let's create another message over here. Call it Jim. Call it, let's see, Jim2. And so what we'll have is, rather than having the left arrow and the up arrow trigger the events, what we'll say is, when I receive the special message Jim1, or when I receive a special message Jim2, that will trigger things, like so. Okay, so how does this work? Well, what happens is, it comes down here, and if it says you're right, you just say broadcast Jim1, and what that will do is it will trigger Jim1 to start. So you don't have to wait for the user to press anything. It just goes directly to Jim1. And so this ensures that the code goes to the right place. So similarly, you'd have to say broadcast Jim1 in those two places as well, because those places are also places where you're pressing the left key to continue. Like so. Now you're receiving Jim1, and when the answer is correct over here, what you want to do is broadcast Jim2 to take them to the next place. Broadcast Jim2, broadcast Jim2, and so forth, and get rid of all of these messages. You're right, and okay, so let's try it now, just to see what it looks like. Rerun the program. Okay, so first of all, we type in 20. And you see it goes immediately to the next one. Then I type in 1. And then it takes me to the next one, and so forth. And if you wanted to, of course, you could put a little wait in, so that when it goes to Jim1 or it goes to Jim2 or whatever, it starts by waiting a second, just to pause to get the user oriented. Okay, that's it. So this latter part about the different creating your own events, that's all completely optional, but I just thought I'd show it to you. But I think the main problem with the code that you were having before, it's a very subtle problem, was that the wait and the following if were they should have been associated just with the error message and not with a successful condition.